Hello. Welcome back to STM Narratives. Before we begin, please comment where you are watching from and the time. It was an unusually warm autumn afternoon in the small suburban neighborhood of Greenfield. Golden leaves scattered across the streets, crunching underfoot as pedestrians strolled along. The sky was a serene blue, with only a few wispy clouds drifting lazily. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass, mixed with the earthy undertones of fallen leaves. At the corner of Maple and Fifth, a bustling intersection, life seemed to hum with quiet normalcy. Children played tag on a nearby lawn, their laughter ringing through the air. A delivery driver unloaded parcels from his van, muttering about the weight of the packages. Cyclists sped past, weaving deftly between parked cars. Standing at the crosswalk, 13-year-old Sean waited for the pedestrian signal to turn green. His dark skin glistened under the sunlight, and his wiry frame bore the awkwardness of adolescence. Dressed in a plain red hoodie and faded jeans, he carried his worn school backpack slung over one shoulder. Sean had just finished his after-school tutoring session and was heading home. He hummed softly to himself, shifting the weight of his bag, when something caught his eye. An elderly woman stood at the corner, her figure small and stooped. Her frail hands gripped a wooden cane, and her pale blue cardigan hung loosely over her bony shoulders. She leaned heavily on the cane, glancing anxiously at the busy street. Cars rushed past, their engines roaring, and her lips pressed into a thin, worried line. Sean hesitated. He wasn't the type to approach strangers. His mom had always told him to be cautious, especially in a world that often saw boys like him as troublemakers before anything else. But something about the elderly woman tugged at his conscience. Maybe it was the way her weathered hands trembled, or the slight shake of her head as she stared at the traffic. "Excuse me, ma'am," Sean said, stepping closer and speaking gently, so as not to startle her. "Do you need help crossing the street?" The woman turned toward him, her pale blue eyes squinting behind thick glasses. For a moment, she seemed unsure, her gaze scanning his face. But then her expression softened into a warm smile. "Oh, thank you, dear," she said, her voice quavering but kind. "These legs of mine aren't what they used to be, and these cars, they go so fast." Sean nodded, offering a shy smile. "No problem, ma'am. I can help you." He extended his arm, and she took it hesitantly at first, but as they started crossing, her grip on his arm became steadier, her steps less uncertain. Sean matched her pace, ensuring they moved slowly and carefully. The sun cast long shadows on the pavement as they walked. Drivers waiting at the intersection began to show signs of impatience, tapping their steering wheels, sighing audibly. But Sean ignored them, focusing only on guiding the elderly woman safely across. In a sleek black SUV idling at the intersection, a middle-aged white woman named Karen Donahue watched the scene unfold with a growing frown. Karen prided herself on being a good citizen, always vigilant for anything out of the ordinary. And to her, this scene was exactly that. Out of the ordinary. "Why's that boy grabbing her arm like that?" Karen muttered to herself, her manicured fingers drumming against the steering wheel. "This doesn't look right." She narrowed her eyes, her gaze locking onto Sean's red hoodie. To her, it wasn't a sign of a casual teenager. It was a warning. Karen reached for her phone and quickly dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "Yes," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. "I'd like to report a robbery in progress. There's a young black male harassing an elderly white woman at the corner of Maple and Fifth. He's wearing a red hoodie. Please send someone quickly." As Karen hung up, her heart raced, not with fear, but with self-righteous satisfaction. She had done her civic duty, or so she believed. Sean, oblivious to the escalating situation, continued guiding the elderly woman. They reached the other side of the street, and she let go of his arm with a grateful smile. "Thank you, young man," she said. "You're very kind. What's your name?" "Sean," he replied, scratching the back of his neck bashfully. "Well, Sean, your parents must be proud to have such a polite boy. You've made my day." Before Sean could respond, the blaring wail of sirens filled the air. His stomach dropped as two police cars screeched to a halt nearby. Red and blue lights reflected off storefront windows, drawing the attention of passers-by. 4 officers jumped out, their hands hovering near their holsters. The lead officer, a tall man with a buzz cut, barked, "Hands up, now." Sean froze, his heart pounding in his chest. What's going on?" he stammered, his arms trembling as he raised them. The elderly woman looked equally bewildered. She stepped in front of Sean, her frail frame dwarfed by the towering officers. "Officers, what is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice quivering but resolute. "Ma'am, are you okay?" one of the officers asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "Did this boy try to rob you?" "Rob me?" she repeated, her face twisting with disbelief. "Of course not. This young man was helping me cross the street." Karen, still parked in her SUV, rolled down her window and called out, "I saw him grab her arm." She looked terrified. The elderly woman's eyes blazed with indignation. "Terrified? I asked him for help. How dare you assume otherwise?" Sean's chest tightened. He had always known the world wasn't fair, but standing here with police officers staring him down, he felt the weight of that unfairness pressing down on him. A small crowd began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Malik, a black man in his late 30s, who had been waiting for a bus nearby. Malik had seen everything: Sean's act of kindness, the elderly woman's gratitude, and Karen's hasty phone call. "Excuse me, officers," Malik interjected, stepping forward. "I was here the whole time. This boy didn't do anything wrong. He was helping her." The lead officer hesitated, his gaze shifting between Malik, the elderly woman, and Sean. Slowly, he lowered his hand from his holster. "Is this true, ma'am?" he asked the elderly woman again. "Absolutely," she snapped. "This boy is a good Samaritan. Whoever called you is either blind or malicious." Karen bristled in her seat. But Malik wasn't done. He walked over to her SUV, leaning slightly toward the open window. "Ma'am," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I couldn't help but notice you were quick to call the cops on that boy. Why is that?" Karen flushed. "I was just concerned for her safety." "Concerned?" Malik repeated, his tone skeptical. "Or did you see a black boy in a hoodie and assume he was a threat?" "That's not," Karen started, but Malik cut her off. "Do you realize what could have happened if the police had been more aggressive? That boy could have been hurt, or worse, all because of your concern." Karen shifted uncomfortably, avoiding his piercing gaze. "You need to ask yourself why you jumped to that conclusion," Malik continued. "It's people like you who make this world harder for kids like him. Think about that the next time you feel concerned." The crowd murmured in agreement, and Karen's face turned beet red. She rolled up her window and drove off without another word. The officers, now fully understanding the situation, apologized to Sean and the elderly woman. "We're sorry for the misunderstanding," the lead officer said, though his tone lacked warmth. Sean nodded numbly, still shaken. The elderly woman patted his arm gently. "You're a brave young man, Sean. Don't let this discourage you from being kind." Malik stepped closer, placing a reassuring hand on Sean's shoulder. "You did the right thing, kid. Don't let anyone make you feel bad for being a good person." As the crowd dispersed, Sean began his walk home. His steps were heavier than before, the weight of the encounter still fresh in his mind. But as he turned the corner to his street, he thought about the elderly woman's kind words and Malik's unwavering support. Maybe the world wasn't all bad. Maybe there were still people willing to stand up against prejudice, and maybe, just maybe, his small act of kindness had sparked a little light in the darkness.